4, 3, 2, 1.
Oh man!
Okay,
I'm already starting.
All right, Jenny. So welcome to the podcast for
All
you
right.
and to all these awesome listeners, like my mom and my wife, and anyone else. But this podcast, and Jenny, I don't even know the name of it yet. So I've been really like trying to jam on what a good name for this podcast would be. There's so many that are taken, But this is the podcast for all the listeners where we talk about mental resilience. It's stories, it's laughs, it's cries, maybe it's everything. It's all of the above, right? So I focus on dyslexia because that's kind of my background, and that's a lot of the hardships that I've had in my life. And so it's good though. But I bring on people like Jenny who are experiencing or have gone through, trials with dyslexia, and maybe just awesome wins too, right? That's what we're looking for. So pumped to have you on, Jenny Kenny. That's a really good, I kind of feel like I could make up a song with that name, and excited to have you. Thanks for joining us today.
Thanks. Yes, absolutely. I'm super excited to be here. I don't think I ever thought in my entire life that I would be on something like this, but I'm super stoked to be here.
Getting prepped, getting warmed out. We were warmed up. See all the words that I mess up. And Jenny is, well, I'll let you introduce yourself, but a recruiter, and you interview all the time. And you were just mentioning, like, man, this is different being on the opposite end of it. So excited to have you. But I like to start these out just by getting a good understanding of who you are, kind of your childhood, family dynamics. Like, what does that look like? Who is Jenny Kenny?
Yeah, Jenny Kenny. That's my real name. Like, I married into that. It wasn't my parents trying to be like funny or cute or anything like that.
That's awesome.
Like, I married someone whose last name is Kenny. So,
nice.
My name is Jenny Kenny. I tried to go by Jennifer Kenny, but everybody liked Jenny Kenny, so it stuck. But I grew up in a fairly normal family, I guess you would say. I'm a middle child. It was a very rural location that I grew up in, so it was a very small town, pretty close knit, small school and everything like that. Also, I was just like a type A little kid. Like, as a 3-year-old, I would pull up the couch cushions and start vacuuming under it. I was very organized, very like, I wanted perfection, even at like a very young age. But then I was also like, I had a creative side of me too. So like the organized and creative side, it came together as like color coding everything. Like, I was always on top of everything. I knew everything that I needed to do. It was always planned out. It was always perfect. Awesome. Still is.
That's cool. And where were you raised? Were you raised in Utah or?
So I was raised in California, a small little rural town in California.
Sweet. And then middle child, you said.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Is that what you're? Okay, cool. And then what about, so you were very, I don't know if that's OCD, right? Or just very organized. But what did you do growing up? Were you into sports? Were you into drama? Were you into music? What was your thing? Okay.
It was more of the arts. So I was always into like, if there were any like little school plays or anything, I would always participate in that. I would paint the backdrop or do any type of creative thing. When I was 10, my mom and I taught ourselves how to knit, and this was like before YouTube. Yeah. Like, before you knew what YouTube was. So it was looking at pictures, it was trying to figure out what it should be, and just kind of trial and error and figuring that out. But yeah, it was a lot of creative activities, a lot of painting, a lot of drawing. Awesome. Creative stuff was my outlet.
We can jam on that a little bit here too, with kind of the dyslexia side. Going into that, what were some, because I know that you've got a little a story around kind of how you found out and this and that, but early signs of dyslexia, like what was school like? What was elementary like? What was all that about?
Yeah, it was actually really hidden from me. I don't think anyone, even myself, really knew that I had dyslexia. I mean, I found out just a few months ago that I have dyslexia, and it shook my world, but it also shed a lot of light on it. But yeah, as a kid, I never thought that what I was doing was way more effort than everybody else. And I think it was hidden because I was successful at school. I got straight A's. I was at the top of my class. In junior high and high school, I graduated as valedictorian. I, like, and I think society doesn't know a lot about dyslexia, myself included, and it took a lot of research to find that out. So with society looking at my story, they'd be like, well, you don't have dyslexia, like you didn't struggle in school. But I can look back at it and be like, no, I actually did study. I didn't struggle in school because I it took forever to do my homework. I would spend hours and hours doing homework. I hardly ever hung out with friends after school or on the weekends. It was dedicated to my schoolwork. It was dedicated to making sure that I was doing the best that I could, and it was perfect, and I would get straight A's. So my friends would be able to read a chapter in a book very, very quickly, and my eyes would jump over the page. I would mix up words. I would see the sentences, but then my brain would just move the words around. Like I would it would say maybe like will not, and not would just be gone, so then it would change the sentence, and then the whole rest of the story was wrong, and then I was like, wait, this doesn't make any sense, and I go back and I'm like, oh, because I got rid of that word. So like it took me a long time to read because I had to reread a lot of things. Writing, like I'm a good writer, but it takes me forever to put all of the words on the page and everything. So yeah, like I can get good grades because I tried really hard and I could get good,
awesome.
but
See,
it just
I was
took me
the same.
forever.
It took me, I never got to hang out. I would hear my friends outside playing, and I would be studying or practicing or whatever, right, with homework. But then I got like solid D's, or F's maybe. Who knows? Thinking I was awesome, I'm like I got this, and then I was like, wait, what's going on? So no, but that's awesome though. That's really, really cool. So what you mentioned though, when we were going back and forth once, just via email, that kind of the way you learn, right? And like the way you look at words, and like you had just mentioned, right? Like sometimes you'll miss a word and then you'll have to reread it. But what is that like for you? Because you said a couple things where I was like, oh man, that's crazy.
Yeah. Okay, so I didn't realize that most people, when they look at a word, they see each individual letter. It's kind of like, you know how they say that dogs can like smell a stew, they can smell the carrots, they can smell the meat, the potatoes, like every individual thing, but humans will just smell stew. I feel the same with reading. It's like I see the word. I see the shape of the word. I don't see the individual letters. And so it gets me in trouble sometimes because I don't see how the word is spelled. I'm a horrible speller. I just learned this year how to spell the word deep because I need cues. I need little phrases to tell me how to spell these words. Like for me, deep, I spell it by, deep clean. I know clean is EAN, so deep is not that. And that's how I've learned how to spell deep. Because it's like, is it DEAP or is it DEEP?
So cool.
I don't know.
So you basically memorize the words and you memorize what they look like. So we had a little family dinner last night, and I was with my brother-in-law, who's a genius, just an awesome dude. And we were talking about dyslexia. And I told him, because he was like, well, how did you learn how to read? And it's kind of very similar where I remember what words look like. I don't sound them out. I don't know how to kind of go through that process. I just remember what they look like, and then I guess, and it's like, I think this is it. But that's hilarious. That's crazy. It was a couple, the way you said that too. I love it. Because a couple months ago, I'm in sales, and I was chatting with my boss. I was in our office, and I was sending an email to someone, to like a prospect or someone, right? And I was like, hey, how do I spell, which version of bat is it? Because I was going to say, yeah, I'm going to do everything I can to go to bat for you, right? And this is one good thing, right? This is one thing that I'm learning about dyslexia and learning about awareness, is how crucial it is to have people understand, right? And and know about who you are and about your dyslexia, because man, there's a lot of kind of crazy horror stories. I've got a couple of them myself just in the professional world. And it took me 4 or 5 years to start this podcast and start this business where I speak at schools and do this and that because of fear, just true fear out of like, I don't want people to know, right? Like, I don't want them to know. It's that fake it till you make it. But my boss right now is a really close buddy of mine, mentor of mine. I've known him for 12 years. And he just kind of stopped. He was sitting behind me. He kind of slowly turned his chair and he goes, "Hey, Ty, like, so I want you to explain to me real quick, what do you mean by that? Like, how many versions of the word bat are there, to be able to spell? How many versions?" I'm like, "Well, of course there's BAT and then there's BATT." And he's like, "Well, which one do you think it is?" And I was like, "Well, I'm going to bat for them." And I think about baseball and sports. So I think it's just one T, because he's like, "Well, what's the other one?" I'm like, "Well, bat like a flying, they have two wings. So two T's. There's BATT and there's BAT." And anyway, and this was like 5-6 months ago. And he's like, "Well, I'm sorry to break it to you, buddy, but there's only one type of spelling of bat. And it's just with one T." So I felt like such an idiot. But like at that point with him, I could joke about it, right? And there's a couple buddies that were working with us. They know,
Right.
and it's kind of an ongoing joke at work, and that Tyler can't spell, and I make up words and I make up sayings and phrases. But so very, very crazy. And I love this setting because I get to chat with people selfishly like Jenny Kenny, who are going through the same thing or have gone through the same things for their whole lives that you just didn't know it, right? Which is so crazy to me. So it makes me feel not as silly, I guess you could say. But yeah. Oh man, that's
Oh yeah, I
crazy.
do the same
So
thing.
this is rad. So dyslexic, Jenny Kenny doesn't know. She's going through school. She's hitting it, straight A's, valedictorian, just crushing it, which is awesome. All right. So what do you do now? Like, did you go to college? Are you what's your profession? I know, but for all the listeners.
Yeah. I went to college. I studied or majored in studio art,
Okay.
so I got my degree in art. I also minored in computer science, which was an absolute mistake. Like, I'm sure we'll talk about like superpowers with dyslexia, but I'm really good at figuring out problems and figuring out like how things work. So I thought, hey,
Yeah.
like computer science, like I can work with computers, I can figure things out. So I minored in computer science, and it was just way too much stress for me. But anyways, yes, I majored in studio art, and after college, I got into TV production. So I worked as a PA, a production assistant, for a while in a couple of TV shows. And then I was like, I don't want to be working 12 or 16 hours every single day. So I was like, what in the world am I going to do? And I ended up getting not an intern. I got a part-time job, kind of a temporary job as a filer in an HR office. And they're like, hey, we need an HR generalist. Do you want to be our HR generalist? And so I'm like, okay, I need a job. So I take the job as HR generalist. I do a lot of recruiting. And it's like, I love talking to people. I love asking them questions and getting to know them. So then that put me on this career path of recruiting. Yeah. So I ask people questions for a living, but it's unique being on the other side of the phone.
Well, that's awesome.
And being asked the questions.
That's really crazy. There's a few. So have you ever heard of Noticeability? You ever heard of that company? So there's a guy named Dean, and then his last name starts with an S, and I think there's a couple T's or something in there. But really cool dude. He's from Boston, I think, or he's out there in that area. But he started a company, Notice Ability. So no disability, and then notice the abilities of dyslexics. And what he's done a lot of research. There's a few people that I really follow quite a bit in this world. There's not a lot. There's not a lot of people out there, but Dean is one of them. But he started this company, and they really focus on helping youth really grow, right? And understand if they're dyslexic or not, right? And those that are, really get them into programs that kind of exploit or help them kind of show their true strengths, right? So kind of the superpowers, like you had mentioned earlier on. So the some of the main takeaways were like entrepreneurship. Arts was a main pillar, because I think with Dean, he's got like 4 pillars. So it's art, entrepreneurship, architecture, and engineering. And when we think about that, like MIT, they're at one point, they're always like around 50%. 50% of their students are dyslexic, which is a really crazy stat, right? And so it's cool to hear for you, Jenny, what you did growing up, kind of the color coordinating, the arts, that whole world that really resonates with you. And so I think that's something important for people to understand is, just because a lot of dyslexics really struggle with school, right? You struggled, but that's a huge resilience. I feel like maybe because I can't say it came easy to you, right? Like I was on a run with my brother a couple mornings ago, and this is a kid that, man, he went through school like he just breezed through it, right? Never studied, none of that, and he just got straight A's. And I was like getting in trouble all the time, and flunking out of classes. But that resilience that kind of I built for myself, but also what I'm kind of getting to for you, Jenny, is, yeah, you might have aced all your tests, but it was a struggle, right? Like you were always on the grind. You were always studying. You're always, so that to me is a huge testament of just kind of your mental resilience. That takes a lot of time, right? You could have just left and hung out with your friends. You could have said, you know what, like I'll only work an hour today on my studies versus 5 hours, right? So maybe what was that like as far as kind of that mental resilience? What were some key things that you did to stay just dedicated to your craft and dedicated to what you wanted to accomplish? How did you get through that?
I think just quitting was never an option. So it was like, I just have to do it. It doesn't matter what it's going to take, what I have to sacrifice, and how stressed out I am. I just have to do it. And maybe it was because I had a big sister that I loved, and she was one of those people like your brother who was just really good at school, and it just came naturally to her. And I saw her doing so well, and I wanted to be just like her. And I was like, well, if this is what it takes to be like her, then maybe that's what I have to do. But I was always like, how hard is high school going to be? I remember being so afraid, like am I going to struggle? Like I was okay in junior high, but how is it going to be in high school? I was always so nervous, and just like in a constant state of anxiety, honestly, of just putting that pressure on myself. And I look back at it now as an adult, and I'm like, I wish I could have told myself, like, just let it go. It doesn't matter if you get straight A's. You can get a B or a 2, maybe a C even. Like it doesn't matter. Just have grace on yourself. So yeah, it was just never quitting, just doing it. Like I had a planner, a physical planner. I'd write everything out that I needed to get done. I planned out my time and what I was going to do and when. Like it was very, very organized, very coordinated to make sure that everything got done and that it was perfect.
So it was just no quit, right? So the no quit attitude. I wanted to ask kind of what what was it that instilled that no quit attitude? And it sounds like, your sister, right? One of those maybe big major impacts on your life. And I say that because like I've already had a few conversations, and some of the individuals that I've talked to didn't have a true support system. And some of them have, really struggled in life. Others, really found it through sports or found it through something, right? So it sounds like for you, it was just the examples in your household.
Yeah, no one was holding me to this. No one was saying like you need to get straight A's. No one was telling me like be like your older sister or anything like that. Yeah. My sister probably doesn't even know that I was like trying to be like her. It was just I put that pressure on myself. It was self-inflicted. I wanted to be and it wasn't so much like I wanted to be like my sister. I mean, I'm sure that was part of it, but also like I just wanted to be good. I wanted to be perfect. I wanted to just be the best that I could at least, but if
Gotcha.
possible, better than
That's
everybody
pretty
else.
awesome and super intense. I like that. So how is that translated to your adult life, right? Like I guess before we get to that, because there's a couple other little things. So one, I guess tell us your
Sure.
story right now, around kind of how you came to it. I know that you saw a couple of things. It's no big deal, whatever. A couple posts, but like what has it been like? So when did you find out that you're dyslexic? And then I want to dive into what it's been like since then.
Yeah. We've been connected on LinkedIn for a little bit, and I know that you're dyslexic. You post about that pretty openly on LinkedIn, and it never really hit home for me. I was like, yeah, I know what dyslexia is. Then you liked or commented on somebody's post, and I was trying to find out. I was like, this is the life-changing post, and I can't even remember what it is. But there's somebody in the dyslexic community who posted that you can have straight A's and be dyslexic. You can be good at math and be dyslexic. You can be good at grammar and be dyslexic. But dyslexia manifests itself in different ways for different people, and not everybody who is dyslexic is always mixing up their P's and their B's or whatever everybody else, whatever society thinks that dyslexia is. It's a lot more nuanced than that. So I was like, because I also struggled with this and this and this that she was mentioning in her post, and it made me go on this rabbit hole of research, and I was just looking into it of like, what does dyslexia look like? And I was like, this is me. This is shedding light on every area of my life. Like, I can see what my childhood looked like, and it aligns perfectly with what they're saying that dyslexia was like. And it was just like a light bulb moment of like, this makes so much sense now. Like, so many stories popped into my mind where it's like, oh, that was a dyslexic moment. That was because of dyslexia, and I didn't realize it, and I made fun of myself. People made fun of me, and I just thought it was like, oh, a funny Jenny type of thing, but it was actually because of dyslexia. So that was really interesting to find out. So thank you for posting on LinkedIn and enlightening me and changing my life.
So no worries, but no, just kidding. Absolutely, just kidding. That is so cool. So, and for the listeners, my headphones are doing something weird. It's important to know too. Like for me, in the journey that I've been on, getting a note from you, Jenny, was massive. Like I remember I was sitting in my room. I think all my kids. I got 4 little kids. My wife. I think they were all out and about. And I remember getting your note on LinkedIn and just reading it. I mean, you left such a really nice, very, very caring, awesome, genuine note. And it was so cool. And it was one of those things where, because for me and my story, right, it's like I feel like I failed at so much in my life. And I feel like whether it's just really anything, but I've always felt really pushed or prompted to help with kind of this dyslexia stuff and awareness and mental resilience and toughness and and all of that, right? But it's been 5 years, and for about 5 years I've wanted to post things. I've wanted to talk about it openly, but 100% being honest, I just was scared as could be. I had a couple experiences in my professional career where my bosses have known about, maybe I told a boss about me being dyslexia and everything changed, and not in a good way, right? Like just as far as the relationship with me and this individual, awesome human being, this person's just phenomenal, but he didn't really know how to handle it and deal with me, right? And so everything completely changed. And so from that moment, I just was thinking, man, like this is crazy, right? Like I got to hide it. I've got to hide it. And your note was so impactful. And so it was just like, and it was just cool. You were so real. You're like, hey dude, like, thanks for posting, because it took me, I remember the moment I posted my first note about dyslexia on LinkedIn. It was about 8 months ago. I was like shaking, and I'm not like afraid of things, but it was a very scary thing for me. It truly was scared of this. and I've gotten notes from you and from a handful of other people, and it's just been really, really awesome. So thank you for that. I'm also very impressed. I was telling my wife yesterday with you, because it's taken me so long to get to this point. I'm like, I think it's crazy that Jenny's down to have a conversation about this. Maybe like, is she not afraid to like talk about this? And, to all my tens of followers and listeners, and soon to be like millions, maybe. Just kidding. But you know what I mean? And I think that's so cool, because it really can be such a huge gift if you look at it that way. There's this quote from this doctor. I'm trying to remember what her name was. It was Maggie something. I'll find it. But she said something like, once you know that you're dyslexic, school and life take on a whole new like journey or whole new meaning, right? So going off of that, what has it been like for you since then? Because that was, I think, in like October, November, and yeah, it's been a handful of months. But has that been the case for you? Like a whole new meaning, do you look at things way differently? What is that like?
Yeah. Yeah, it changes everything, but then it also just makes everything have so much more sense to it. Like one of the things that I struggle with, it's almost like my brain has buckets of related words. So I will like I've studied art in and out, and I know my colors, but then I'll say like, "Oh, the sky looks so orange today." It's like, no, I meant blue. Like, I just pulled out the wrong one. Like, I know what I'm trying to say, but I say the wrong ones, and I would always get so frustrated with myself of like, why can't I say what I'm actually like? It's in my brain, and sometimes I'll even think that I'm saying the right word, and I'll be in conversations with people, and I'll say something wrong, and they're like, "Huh?" And I was like, what I just said. And they're like, that's not what you just said. And I was like, yes, it is. And like, no, you said this. And I was like, oh, oops. And I think since discovering that I have dyslexia and being able to share that with my friends or my family members, my coworkers, it makes it a lot easier, because they're like, oh, that was a dyslexic moment. I know what she's trying to say. Like, she means blue or whatever. Like, it allows you to have more grace on yourself, and allows other people and yourself to just kind of laugh at it and be like, oh, that was because of that. So that's one thing where it's like my struggles are more explainable, and I can have more grace on myself. And then also in my research, I was able to find about the dyslexic strengths, and I was like, what in the world is a dyslexic strength? And like, we kind of talked about that. I'm pretty creative, and I learned how to knit. I taught myself how to knit when I was 10. Now as I'm knitting, and I feel like such an old grandma. I've been knitting for 20 years. Like, when I knit, I hardly ever follow a pattern directly, because in my brain I can see this is what I want it to look like, and these are the stitches that I need it to I need to do to make it look like that. So even if a pattern has it one way, it's like, that's not the way I want it to look. I'm going to change it, because I can see it, that whole picture. I'm really good at putting together those pieces, being able to see the full thing, whether it be on a creative side or even on a professional side. If it's like some type of like software implementation of like, how is this going to affect our team and how it will be useful, I love to dig into that and see how it works. And I believe that's part of my dyslexia is just being able to see that full picture, being able to recognize patterns and put things together in a way that the average person might not be able to do.
I love hearing that, because so like you have the weaknesses, right? And then you have the strengths. I think, those weaknesses, like studying for hours as you did growing up, they're for something, right? Like it's for a reason, in my opinion, and it's helping you become more mentally resilient, more like just dedicated, right? You can buckle down on things. There's so much that comes from those weaknesses, or the differences. And by the way, it's always I was meeting with someone a few years ago, and I said, yeah, dyslexia is a disability. And she's like, no, 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 no. She like kind of, if she could have reached me, it's not like I'm saying I'm tall, I'm just pretty short, but she was sitting across the table. She would have slapped me, I feel like, because she's like, no, 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 no. It's differences. It's not a disability. It's a difference. So, it's that mental difference that we talk about. But those differences, right? Those struggles can really help us kind of grow, that dyslexic muscle, I guess you could say, right? And then there's on the other hand, there's the strengths that come from it.
Yeah.
So it's one of those things, and I think you had mentioned before. So when you had seen my post or the post that I commented on, there's a few people that I think are very influential to follow. Natalie Brooks is one, and both of these women are both out of the UK, and then Kate Griggs. And Kate is like the godmother of dyslexia. I feel like she's written an awesome book. I actually have it. It's called "This Is Dyslexia." I'm going through it. It's really hard because I love audiobooks, but there's pictures, so it makes it real nice to read. You know what I'm saying? But pictures and bullet points and things to make it easy. But exactly, 100%. And so
exactly what a dyslexic needs.
They talk about as far as just the strengths, right? And so what you're talking about, Jenny, being able to see kind of patterns kind of in your mind, right? Being able to kind of adjust and use that to be creative, to be able to make something that might be even better, right? And so that's one big thing in the workforce, I think, that's helped. And for me, kind of one of my things is being able to see kind of, I feel like I'm so simple-minded, but there's certain things that I feel like I'm able to see that could happen if we go this route in business versus this route, that just, seem very blatant and apparent to me. But when I chat with other people, it's not something that they think about, so some really interesting things. And then I think it's having the courage, having the guts to be able to act on that stuff, right? And be able to understand, hey, this could be a dyslexic trait or quality that I have that I'm feeling right now. Like the way I'm seeing this, I should probably use that and act on it, right? So those are interesting. So for you, Jenny, I mean, I would love to understand kind of, you had mentioned, now that I know, I look back and I see, certain moments, some Jenny moments that you mentioned, right? But maybe kind of related to dyslexia. Any funny stories, hard stories, any of those moments come to you that you can look back on and be like, that was that dyslexia.
Yes, 100%. As soon as I found out about my dyslexia, the first story that came to my mind was like,
let's hear it.
Oh, that makes so much more sense now. So I mentioned that I read by the shapes of words, and I always loved reading as a kid. So I was reading this series of books. Like, it was probably like 7, 8 books in a series as like a junior high. I think I was in like 7th or 8th grade. I was reading this book, and there were these 2 kids in Germany, and they went on different adventures and whatnot. But a little tiny part of their story that would come up throughout the different books is that they had these homing penguins. And I was like, okay, like, yeah. I don't know about Germany. Maybe they do have penguins there. I don't know. How do they get on the roof and down the chimney? I don't really understand, but like, okay. And I didn't think anything of it. I was like, this is this person's book. It's not a true story, so whatever, homing penguins. And it was a small part of the book, so I didn't put a lot of emphasis on it. 10 plus years later, I'm a senior in college, and I'm reading a book, and it says homing pigeons. And I was like, it's pigeons. And everybody said like, huh? And I was like, homing pigeons, not homing penguins. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, that, like, there's no homing penguins. That's not a thing. And I was like, awesome. I don't know. Okay. Yeah. And I just I changed the whole meaning of that book. And I was
no way. So forever you just thought
that makes so much more sense.
Probably since you're like, oh man, they got these homing penguins out in Germany. Yeah. That, that is awesome. And that's because the way you read that word. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I was like, maybe they have these big chimneys.
That's hilarious. I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And even now, when I look back at that, that story, or like my memory of reading those books, it's
That's how you
still the
saw it.
homing penguins, because
Oh,
that's
that's
how I read
crazy.
it for so
Oh,
many
that's
years. It was
hilarious. I
homing
wonder how
penguins.
many times
Yeah.
people have done that and just don't realize, right? Like,
Yeah.
you know, in the dyslexic world. That's wild.
Yeah.
Okay. That's awesome. What other moments or
Hmm.
experiences for you
Yeah.
have
Yeah.
kind of helped shape or maybe brought up some funny experiences or some touching ones?
Yeah. Okay, so this one I can laugh at it now, but it was really rough. And okay, so we talked about my story about being this type A person, needing straight A's, needing to be the best. I struggle with taking tests. Like, if I get verbal information, or even if I'm reading something and it's timed, I like
Mhm.
blink. I don't understand what just was said, what I just read. I don't know, like, especially in a new situation. If I've done
Yeah.
multiple tests and it's the same format, then I'm pretty okay. Well, I had to take the ACTs.
Yeah.
You take the SATs or ACTs to get into college and whatnot. So it's a whole new test. I don't know what's going on, and I'm taking the test, and I get to the end of the section, and it's like, let's say there's like 50 questions or something like that. My Scantron has 75 questions, and I was like, did I miss a whole section here? Like, why are there 25 missing questions? And I'm like flipping through the book, and I'm like trying to find like where I messed up. And the proctor comes by and sees that I'm not in the right section. She like slams her hand down on my desk, grabs my test, and is like, come to the front of the room. And I was like freaking out, this like little high school kid who doesn't know what's going on. And I was like, what did I miss? Like, what happened? And I go to the front, and she's like, don't go into other sections. And I was like, I was looking for the missing question. She's like, it says it, like, you don't go past, like, there's going to be more questions there's going to be more questions on the Scantron that there is on the actual booklet. So there's going to be extra. I was like, I didn't realize that. I didn't see that. Like, I'm sorry. And she's like, okay, well, I'll give this back to you for the next sections, but don't do it again. I was like, okay. So I'm like freaked out the rest of it. Like, I'm sure I did horrible on that test, and I got a letter mailed to me like, no more cheating on those tests or whatever. And I was like, oh no. Yeah. Now I look back at it, it was like
That's
hilarious, but
wild.
I was freaked out.
That's crazy. We oh man, we had this I kind of had it wasn't ACT. It was man, what was it called? When you're in high school and you're taking like a college credit. What are those classes called? What was that? AP class.
Classes,
So I was
like
in one
the
AP
AP,
class and I
like
thought I was
advanced
a baller
placement
because I was
classes.
like, yeah, Tyler's
Uh-huh.
in an AP class. Anyway, I studied super hard for the test. Super, 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 super hard for weeks. I remember being like, I'm going to ace this thing. I'm going to show everybody. I remember I was so like determined and dedicated. I wanted to blow everyone's mind, right? Like I was like, this is it. Because I was a funny kid. I was a sports guy, but like I wasn't a school kid at all, right? So I'm like, I'm gonna do this thing. So we didn't know I was dyslexic at that time, and I remember taking it, and I remember this is the part where I really like look back. I'm like, man, I really was so. I don't want to say dumb because, but like I don't understand it because I'm taking it and I'm like flying through. I'm like, oh, I know this answer. I know this answer. Anyway, and then it was back, when they mail you back the test, right? It's not like automatic. So, and that was at the end of the school year. So now it's summer. I'm checking the mailbox every day for like 3 weeks. And I get it finally, come inside. I show my mom. I'm like, hey, can you open this thing up? She's like, all right, like, let's go. And she knew like I had been stressing about this thing so hard. And I'm like, mom, you read it. And I think so they score AP tests 1 through 5, right? And like 5 is, yeah. So anyway, so we're going through it, and I'm so nervous and I'm so excited because I just know like my parents are going to take me for some frozen yogurt after this. I'm going to get rewarded. It's going to be phenomenal. And so she reads through it. She was like, oh, Tyler, you did it. You did it. She starts screaming. She's like, you got it. You got a 1. You're number 1. You're number 1. And I'm losing it. I'm like, yeah. Me and mom are just chest bumping left and right. I'm freaking out. Like, I'm about to cry. I'm so grateful. I'm like, all that hard work. Like, I freaking did this thing. And next thing I know, I look over and she's on the ground. And my mom's psycho. And she's like about to pee herself. She is laughing so hard. And I'm like, what's up, mom? I'm like, what's the matter? And she starts crying because she can't stop laughing. And I bet Cam, you got a 6-pack during that laugh. But anyway, she just is like, I'm sorry, buddy. Like, I love you so much, but a 1 is a fail. Like number 1 is the worst you could get. Cause I was thinking, I'm like, I'm number 1, And anyway, so absolutely failed my AP test, AC test. I don't even remember those things. But I just remember studying so hard just to get a 1, but I'm always going to be number 1 in mom's eyes. So that's cool. Anyway. Oh, those tests, but it's real though, right?
That's an awesome story. I love that.
And I know that because dyslexia is a lot more known now than kind of when we were growing up, but it's still not even close. Like, there's still 1 in 5. I think it's like 1 in 5 dyslexics are identified in elementary school. So there's like 80% of dyslexia, dyslexic kids leave school not knowing that they're dyslexic, and their teachers don't know that they're dyslexic. And so that the help that could have been there was not there, right? Which is just wild and crazy. And so one of those big things is not being able to, I would love in college to have taken tests alone, right? Like in a room that wasn't timed. And I don't hear all the zippers being zipped up and people leaving and me thinking like, man, I'm so dumb. You know what I mean? That sounds like for you, that was a big aspect with test taking, right? Was taking your time. Were you ever like the last one in these tests, or how did that pan out? Stupid question.
It's always the last one. You could be at the top of your class and still be the last one. Yes.
I mean, I seriously love though chatting with you about how you were valedictorian, you were the top of the class every year, and you were dyslexic, right? And that's one of those things that I think Kate Griggs and Natalie Brooks and this Dean, the last name I can't remember, that they talk about, right? And it's hey, maybe you might be great at writing, but it's hard for you to put your thoughts on paper, right? Or the reading aspect might not be as bad as what other dyslexics might go through, but man, you can't say what you want to say all the time, right? So with that being said, what are from your learnings now, what are your biggest issues with dyslexia? Like where you're like, that's dyslexia. Like what are the biggest things? Obviously the reading, like you had mentioned, the penguin story is awesome. That's one for the books that I'm always going to remember. But is there anything else that you've noticed that you're learning about?
See, I will I mentioned how I will say the wrong words. I will I'll call my brother by my husband's name or vice versa. It's like, I know your guys' names. I love you both, but I just can't say the right one. Sorry, that's not gonna happen. I don't do well with verbal instructions, kind of like I said. So if people are telling me a bunch of things, or I'm at work and I'm interviewing somebody and they're giving me a bunch of information and they're just spewing it out, I'm a slow typer. I do mix up my letters. I mean, as a kid, I did do all of those typing tests where we practice typing. I felt like I was so fast, and then I think it was after college I realized that everybody else is 110 words per minute is normal, and I'm at 40 or something like that. So it's I'm super slow at typing compared to the rest of people, just because I have to take what people are telling me and process that and then put that to my fingers and remember where all the letters are, and I do kind of mix up, because letters I feel are related. L to me is related to T and H, so I'll put LE instead of THE, and I'm not trying to speak in Spanish or type in Spanish. I go with what is related, so I mess up all the time. So I think with realizing that, what I've been able to do is figure out what works for me, and that's using a transcription service. So I asked my candidates, like, hey, do you mind if I record this? I still type and take notes, but if I miss something, I'm not like freaking out and feel bad to having to ask them to redo it, because I'll just look at the
really
transcription
cool.
later,
Okay, so
later
using
and
these
figure
tools,
it out.
because there's more and more that are coming out, right? Like certain pens and pencils for dyslexics that I don't know much about those. I don't know if you do, but I've seen a bunch of them. So it just helps with, yeah.
No, I haven't seen that. I've seen I think it's called
That's right.
dyslexia or something
Yeah,
like that.
yeah.
It's a keyboard where it's like color coded, so you have like your letters and your numbers are different colors, and I can see how that would really help me as a color coordinated
wild.
person to
I've
really
seen
focus
that, but
on what I'm
I
trying
haven't looked
to
into
type.
those. Yeah, that's crazy. So I guess for people listening, Jenny, and for your crazy experience, I love it. I love hearing kind of how, I mean, just you knowing over the last few months and how it's really changed everything for you. You look at things so differently. It probably brings you relief, right? Like just kind of like a weight off your chest to understand like, oh, okay, like this is dyslexia, right? But then being able to help others, right? Because I mean, I think it's like 1 in 5 people are dyslexic, and there's a lot of us out there, right? And so it's being able to help others identify and understand, and then being able to use kind of their special traits or those superpowers, like you had mentioned, to be able to better their families, better their workplace, better anything that they're trying to accomplish. So, what are, I guess, kind of a twofold question? One, what would you say to people that are struggling with dyslexia right now, right? And then maybe kind of, I don't know, maybe it's just people with similar challenges as you, like right now listening to this, that might not know that they're dyslexic, but after hearing Jenny, maybe they're realizing like, oh, geez, there's something here with me, right? But any advice for those people out there, what would you say?
I think information is key, because everyone's always afraid of the unknown. It's, you were talking earlier about like not wanting to start this podcast. I'm guessing probably because like it's the unknown. What is it going to look like? What are people going to think of you? Or how is their perception of you going to change, or whatnot? Like the unknown is really scary. So I think doing the research and figuring out, like, do you have dyslexia or not? Like, what are your strengths or your challenges? Knowing like what kind of accommodations can make your life a little bit easier, so that you can gain that control over an area of life where maybe it had control over you, or you didn't. What am I trying to say? Like, if there's something that's unknown in your life, information shines light on that. Whether it's good or bad, you still have that information, and it's up to you what to do with it. If you don't know something, then it's going to always have control over you. So I would say, yeah, the biggest thing is getting that information and gaining that control over that area of your life. And then the second part is to have grace on yourself, to realize where you might be struggling, and just be able to laugh at that, or be able to at least recognize like, okay, I struggle with spelling or word recognition or how to pronounce words or whatever, and just be like, okay, that's a dyslexia thing, and I'm really good at this and this and this, and dyslexia has helped me in that area. So really recognizing where your strengths are, where your weaknesses are, having grace on yourself, being able to laugh, and sharing that with other people too, because like if you share it with somebody, then they can understand where you're coming from as well, and then they're not as frustrated of you as like, why can't you talk? Why can't you form a sentence?
I
And
love
it's
that. You
because
said
of
a few key
dyslexia. It's
things I'm going to
okay.
look back on. But you've said it a few times, but have grace on yourself, which I absolutely love, because it's one of those where I like to talk about kind of the bully in your head, right? Like we all have that inner bully, that inner, whatever you want to call it, that inner critic. And we can't give that person or that thing power, right? It's got to be, we need to have love for ourselves and have grace on ourselves. And I absolutely love that. I'm always going to remember that. And then you mentioned something around, how light, information is light, right? So like understanding certain things, but then being able to like be informed, right? Like learn and do what you did, right? Like you saw a post and then start studying. And that's kind of how my story was. Someone said something. I knew I was dyslexic since I was 18 when I got tested. But then I was in someone's house and she had mentioned talking to me like I knew what she was talking about. Oh, my daughter with dyslexia has a hard time explaining her thoughts, or she says the wrong words all the time. And I was like, it's more than just not being able to read well, or you know what I mean? And I stayed up for hours and getting that information. And it has been light for me. It's been so releasing, right? Like relieving, or whatever the words are. There's any words that people can come up with. But being able to be like, I feel good, right? Like it's like, oh, okay, it's just different. So I love that. This has been so impactful chatting with you. And if there's, I don't know, I think that anyone listening to this, it's so cool chatting with you because of your story. It's kind of an opposite end of the spectrum, right? Where it's like you've crushed school and you had, I'm sure there's so many people out there that are like that, right? But it's great understanding and hearing this, right? And so hopefully your message is able to reach to so many different people and help inspire them to learn more about it, gather more information, have grace on themselves, which is massive. And like you said, kind of laugh about it. Cause I think if we can be happy and smile more and giggle a little bit, that just makes everyone's day a little bit better. So yeah, that's massive. I love it.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. You mentioned earlier that I forget exactly what you said, but something along the lines of like being successful or whatnot. And I think that's a really important thing to define like what success is. And I think as someone who is so type A or OCD or whatever you want to call it, and then also dyslexic on top of that, like I defined my success as getting those good grades, and then because of that, I put on so much pressure on myself. And I think success needs to be redefined because like you were successful in changing my life. Like it doesn't like I don't know whatever else you're doing in your life. Like you've made an impact on my life, and you're making an impact by having this podcast. And you have, because of what you are doing, it is successful, and other people's success is going to look different. It doesn't, success for everybody is going to be a different thing. And I think, especially in the dyslexic community, it's important to know that success is going to look different.
I've got like 100 like one-liners or quotes from you that, and this is maybe be dyslexia, but I've got them all over. There's no like rhyme or reason or organization to it. And so I'm going to spend a lot of time compiling all this and thinking through it. But Jenny Kenny, you're the bomb. I love this. This has been awesome chatting with you. I appreciate you jumping on. I think people are going to get a lot of good nuggets out of this. So thank you so much.
Good.
Yeah.
Awesome.
Absolutely.
I hope so. Thank you so much for having me here. It's a pleasure.
I think I pressed this button, but I can like edit all like things. Let's see here. You killed it.
Okay, cool. Also, I have thought of the name for your podcast.
Yeah, well,
okay, you switch up. Do you switch up your letters? You do. Okay. An idea here is call it the Kit Chat, because it's like chit chat, but like mixing up the letters, so it's like Kit Chat.
Kit Chat. I love that. Yeah.
No, I feel like some type of name where it's like mixing up the letters, because then that's not going to be taken.
I'm not kidding. It has been. I have like, it's been wild. Like this whole stupid thing, because I'm like, I put too much time and effort into like dumb things. Where my wife for years just chat with people, and like things like this, like the name of a podcast. I will spend forever like just going crazy over it. Like, what should it be? And I like there's got to be this like nice meaning, because I'm doing so. Spend Love Co. is the name of the brand, and I'm going to launch it in like 2 months. I'm trying to get like 5 to 10 of these podcasts, because I've got this mentor guy that's been doing this for years, and he's phenomenal. And he's just like, just wait. And then launch it so you can be consistent, right? And be able to like every week post things. And so I've been thinking a lot about it, but like for years, it's like, what does the logo got to look like? So my logo is a Joshua tree. If you know what those are, yes, you do. I mean, you're from California, and anyway, but the meaning behind them, yeah. So the meaning behind them,
Yeah,
I think,
land
really
of Joshua
rad,
trees.
right? Because it's like they all look different because of the winds and how like extreme the weather is down there in that area. But they're all beautiful and they're all strong because their roots are strong. So it's kind of like founded by belief, rooted in love, like really. So it's a lot more than just like dyslexia, kind of what I want to tackle. But honestly, it's something for me. It's hard. It's like, should I just focus on dyslexia? But with like my speaking engagements at schools, it's more around like mental resilience, and then and then like dyslexia, right? Because I think to me it ties in, right? And so it's just being able to like, but I spend forever, Jenny, on stupid things that it's like this, like right here, like I love it. I hope they made, I hope my questions were good for you. I think you killed it. I think if anything, I just need to be better at, I have a hard time like sticking to things. And I think it is dyslexia. I'm always just like, I kind of want to go with the flow, right? But it's like, I don't know. I've got my bullet points, but I have a hard time looking at them all the time with anything. And even in sales. Yeah, because I feel like you did
No,
awesome.
I thought it went
I
really
just
well.
hope I didn't lead you like astray and
I
stuff,
spent
you know?
hours. I said everything that I wanted to because like you sent the questions like these are great questions, so I'm like typing
Yeah.
like I spent hours. I was like trying to memorize or like not like memorize, but just like know the script. And then you asked the questions like I did answer that question, but I didn't want to look away from the camera.
You did awesome. I loved your
This
answers.
is what I
hope
thought
I
my
didn't throw
answer
you
was.
off. And that's another thing. It's like,
Okay.
It's another thing. It's like the other people that I have
No,
on.
you're good.
See, you're awesome. I seriously, like, I'm blown away by you. And I seriously have a bunch of words that I can't read, but like one-liners that